Hello, I'm the Metric Monster, and thank you for joining me to think about the metric system. Some of you may be familiar with the metric system, and this will simply be a refresher, and others may have a rising feeling of anxiety when someone mentions the metric system. But do not fret, we will dispel that anxiety together. I know it's strange that a green monster will possibly help you dispel your anxiety, but just trust me on this one. So to start with, why do we have the metric system? Well, throughout history, you humans have found it incredibly useful to be able to measure things. Usually this was done in reference to other things. When people would write home to mom, they would say things like, "Today I found an interesting leaf. It was as light as a feather, but about as wide as a flowering rose." Or, "I can trade you 20 feathers weight of mint for 10 feathers weight of basil." This eventually developed into thousands of systems of measurement, and people had trouble translating between all these different measurement systems. In part because not all feathers are the same or even similar weights. In France, a standard developed in reference to the king. The king's arm length became the standard measure of length, which worked, unless you had shorter or longer arms than the king. After the revolution in France in 1789, the Academy of Sciences decided that they wanted a standard of measurement that relied on naturally occurring things and not some king. So they developed a standard length, which was 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator through Paris. Thus, the meter was born. Now, I could tell anyone I had 1 meter of cloth to sell, and they would know what I was talking about. The rest of the world caught on quickly, but the United States had just won its independence from Great Britain and refused to participate. They then developed more systems of measurement for mass, temperature, and volume based on universal constants. The base units we will be covering are the meter for measuring length, the gram for measuring mass or weight, the liter for measuring volume, and Celsius for measuring temperature. The systems are all based on tens to make conversion easy, because you humans have 10 fingers. This doesn't help us monsters much, but that's okay. Since the metric system is based on tens, it's known as a decimal system. Conversions tend to be much easier with the metric system than they are with the inches and feet you're used to. Instead of 12 inches in a foot and 3 feet in a yard, we just use the meter and move the decimal place and add a prefix for larger or smaller measurements. Although it is possible to measure everything with just the meter, the zeros can become unruly, and us metric monsters are allergic to too many zeros. We just can't handle it. Watch. That meter stick is 1,000 millimeters. Achoo! Oh, yeah, so metric monster allergies can be a little dangerous at times. The prefixes we'll cover are kilo, hecta, deca, base unit, deci, centi, milli. Say, I want to know how thick my app card is. Since we're talking about length, we will use the meter. But the meter is way too big to measure it. It's actually 0.001 of a meter. So instead, we just use the prefix milli. Your app card is 1 millimeter thick. If we need to convert, we can just slide the decimal place. There are 10 millimeters in a centimeter, and 10 centimeters in a decimeter, and 10 decimeters in a meter. The photo on your app card is 20 millimeters by 20 millimeters. Or, to conserve zeros, we can say it's 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters. If we need to measure something like the drive between the Wright College of Education building and, say, Lowe's Foods, which is about 2,000 meters, we can just move the decimal place and say it's about 2 kilometers. These prefixes work for most all of the base units in the metric system, so you can convert from grams to kilograms by moving the decimal place. 1,000 grams is 1 kilogram. If you can remember the prefixes, you can do any metric conversion. One common way to remember them is the saying, "King Henry died by drinking chocolate milk." But I want you to think of your own mnemonic device. Use the letters K, H, D, B, D, C, M. Those stand for kilo, hecta, deca, base unit,